So the guys at the Blender Foundation have been killing it lately, and hot on the heels of the epic Blender 2.80 release, we have 2.81 coming out in November. And I reckon this new release probably has more features in it than the last like 10 versions of Maya combined. So I wanted to just go through today with you guys and show you sort of my top features, my top favorite features in the new release. And let me just say, it's nothing to do with sculpting or image denoising. So let's check it out. This first one is my number one feature. I'm so excited about this over sculpting, over everything. And you're gonna laugh because it's just the tweaks they've done to the outliner. Coming from Maya, Blender has been like painful to use in this regard. Like it's still, you know, when I'm kind of recommending, friends of mine who are Maya guys or whatever, check out Blender. All of them have come back to me and said, what's the deal with this freaking outliner? So I'm so happy that they've fixed this. So in previous versions of Blender, the outliner kind of had its own selection mode, which was this kind of blue highlight here. So say for instance, you selected a bunch of objects and then you clicked in the viewport and deselected them, they would stay selected in the outliner. And so this is pretty confusing, especially for new users or anyone who's come from kind of any other software. The cool thing about 2.81 is they've gotten rid of this, and now that blue outliner selection is synchronized with the viewport. So I'll select a bunch of objects here and then click off them in the viewport, and the outliner selection is also cleared. They've also done some other cool things which are more consistent with other software, where you can click an object, hold down Shift and click another object, and everything in between will get selected. If you use Control instead of Shift, you can just add to the selection easily. If you want to use a box to select things, you can do that too. I think before you had to push the B key or something. So you can use the cursor keys to kind of move up and down between objects, use left and right to kind of move down into the hierarchy. Right will sort of expand things, left will collapse them. You can parent multiple objects at the same time. Just say we select a bunch of these guys, drag them, you got to hold down Shift to enable parenting, and then if you just drop them like that, there you go, they're all parented under cube. Essentially it gets rid of a lot of the kind of one-by-one actions that you had to do in the previous versions of Blender. My favorite F2 to rename works now in the outliner as well. Anyone who's watched any of my videos will know how much I love to name things and keep things organized. So this next feature as well, I think is great. It is a built-in battery namer. So now if you push Control F2, it will bring up this window here, and you can do all sorts of cool stuff like find and replace, set name directly. So say we want to just add a suffix called cool, push enter, and then all the objects get cool added to the end of their name. You can do stuff like find and replace, so we could find cool and replace it with like hot. And so that's like, it's a really cool, like powerful tool. The viewport render modes have changed as well. Now this one, the one that's now called Material Preview, used to be called Look Dev. The difference is now that this, the rendered mode can now also use these built-in HDRs that come with Blender. And even if you're in cycles, it will also use them. This is handy because your material preview will be set up to render with Eevee. You could then set your rendered view to be cycles, but still be using those same HDRs that you see in the material preview. Another handy one is that the shadow settings for Eevee have been simplified. So there used to be this VSM and ESM mode and stuff like that, and which one you wanted to use kind of depended on the situation that you wanted to use it on. And now it's a lot more simplified, and the method they're using for shadows now kind of reduces a lot of the light bleed and bias problems that you used to have with the old shadow setup. So that's a really cool one. Another feature I really missed from Maya that they've now put into Blender is the ability to edit the pivot points of objects directly. You enable it by going up into this options menu here and turning on origins, and then you'll get this giant kind of origin icon here. So anytime you use any of the transform tools like G or R, rather than it affecting the object, it affects the pivot point. So you can see it there, that little origin point there. So now if we turn it back off and hit R again, our pivot point is out there. This is a lot easier than the old method, which involved putting the 3D cursor somewhere and then having to go up here and say set origin to 3D cursor. There's this feature I love to use in Houdini where you can kind of right click any parameter and link it up to another parameter, and to create like a kind of permanent link between those two values. And it's really handy for, you can use it for so many different things and sort of set up these really kind of cool relationships and proceduralism within your scene. So now Blender has something similar. If you pick any kind of parameter here, say for instance the location X, you can say copy as new driver, and then you can pick something else and say paste driver. And so that value now, the X value of this cylinder, is hooked into the Z value of this cone. So if I then just go move this along the X axis, it moves the cone along the Z axis. And this is a great intro for drivers as well, because very simply you can create a driver and then you can kind of go in here and say, okay, open drivers editor, and I want to add a bit of an offset to the position or something like that. And so it's a really good introduction to kind of get into drivers and the sort of power that they provide. And so there's a couple of other things that they've changed, and these ones are maybe in a little bit of two minds about. So one of them is the new file browser. So say we go import FBX or something. This now pops up in its own window as opposed to taking over the whole screen. And again, this is kind of, I suppose, making things feel like other industry standard software. And yeah, it's cool. I mean, they've got the options here on the right hand side. Again, it's kind of, I talk about Maya a lot in this video, but yeah, it's very Maya-like, where you have all your options in the right here. And it's cool how you can kind of hide it and show it and stuff like that. You kind of have to relearn a little bit of muscle memory now, because you've got to, if you want to go into a folder, you have to like double click it now instead of single click and stuff like that. I think it's overall a change for the better, and again, to kind of make Blender a little bit more friendly for people who haven't used it before. You can, if you want, go into the preferences, and under interface, you have this temporary windows section, and you can switch the file browser back to the full screen mode if you like. You'll also notice here we have render in new window. This used to be up here in the render menu. This is one I was sort of a little bit annoyed with myself, because I like to be able to switch between either a new window popping up or having it built into the interface, and having it up here in the render menu was nice and handy to get at. Now it's kind of buried in the preferences. It's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I suppose it'll just be a matter of kind of changing your workflow to suit the new interface. So overall, I'm really loving this new release. It's kind of like they've put the last little bit of polish onto Blender 2.8 with this new one. I mean, I personally have kind of switched over to using this version most of the time. The only thing I'd say is if you're doing commercial work, maybe don't switch yet. It's a little bit crashy. It's got some kind of annoying bugs, but I'm sure that'll all be sort of ironed out by November. But yeah, this is YouTube. You know the deal. Have a look at the channel. If you like it, hit the subscribe, hit the like, and I'll see you next time.